My hands roamed her body, exploring every curve as if to engrave it in my mind. I felt her cool skin under my fingers heating up with desire. She shivered slightly, her breathing becoming rapid as my hands moved down, gliding over her slim waist and then tightening around her hips, pulling her closer to me. She didn't resist. Her soft body melted into mine, accepting every lead without hesitation. The atmosphere between us was thick with long suppressed desire. All rules, all limits were broken in that moment. There were only two people rushing into each other as if this was the last time they would live in uncontrolled passion. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our channel, where we will bring you the most interesting and dramatic stories in life. These stories will take the audience from one surprise to another. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any episodes. If you love Jane, go to the playlist to find Jane's other channels. In today's video, we will bring to you the story of my mother. Please follow along. Austin and I are best friends. We are both in our third year of college. We have been together since middle school, high school, and even in college, we were in the same class. We are as close as real brothers. That is why both families treat us like their own children. Austin lost his father when he was young. He was raised by his mother, and because he lacked his father's affection, my father loved him very much. Every time he came to my house, my father cared so much for him that sometimes I didn't even know who his real son was. Austin's mother is 42 years old this year. She is petite, has fair skin, and an average face, but in return, she is very skillful in speaking. She works as an accountant for a private company, has a good income, so the life of mother and son is not difficult or competitive. She raised Austin alone, with no intention of remarrying. She never went anywhere except for work, and after work she went straight home so no one could approach her. This summer we came home for vacation, and we were always together, sometimes staying at my house, sometimes I went to his house. My house is about 5 km from Austin's, which isn't considered far. Although Austin and I are the same age, I look more mature, talkative, and think about things that few people my age care about. He's still very childish, and he acts like a high school student in many ways. One afternoon when I was at Austin's house, he asked me to go out and play. I had just agreed when I heard a gentle voice from behind. "Hi, can you come in and help me?" I turned around and saw Austin's mother standing at the door, smiling slightly. I nodded and walked into the house. She asked me to help fix the lamp in the living room. While I was standing on a chair trying to change the light bulb, she stood below holding the chair for me. While I was struggling with the light bulb, I suddenly lost my balance and fell. We both fell into an awkward situation, my body pressed against hers. Our eyes met. An awkward moment passed. She quickly stood up with a red face, thanking me. "Baby, go out and play with Austin." I walked out, still feeling emotional. Austin saw me and smiled and asked, "What's wrong, Hi? Your face looks so red." I just smiled awkwardly and we both went out to play. But the image of Austin's mother kept appearing in my mind, making it impossible for me to concentrate on anything else. Maybe it was just a small accident, but it left an indelible mark on me. After that incident, that image kept sticking to my mind. Sometimes I didn't understand why I had such thoughts. That night, I stayed at Austin's house for dinner. During the meal, she and I didn't dare look straight at each other. We just tried to avoid each other. Only she and I knew this, and Austin only focused on eating and drinking, not paying attention to anything else. While eating, Austin suddenly said to me, "Sleep at my house tonight, it's dark, and I don't feel safe when you come back." Hearing Austin say that, I thought for a moment and then nodded. I turned to look at Austin's mother. When she saw me looking, she seemed startled, then immediately said, "That's right, Hi. Just stay here and sleep. I'll call your parents later to let them know." I smiled and nodded in agreement. After dinner, Austin and I helped her clean the dishes. At that time, she was standing in the kitchen washing the dishes. I brought some plates closer. When she turned around, her hand suddenly touched mine. As soon as we touched, both of our eyes stopped and looked at each other for a moment. She quickly picked up the plate and went back to washing it, while I felt an indescribable feeling in my heart. I went to the living room to watch a movie with Austin. Throughout the movie, I couldn't concentrate and kept thinking. That night, when it was late, Austin and I were getting ready for bed. Austin's room had two single beds, one for him and one for the guest. Austin lay down on his bed, and I climbed into the other bed. Even though I lay down, I still couldn't sleep. Images of Austin's mother kept lingering in my mind. Near midnight, I heard light footsteps in the hallway. A little curious, I tiptoed out through the crack in the door. I saw Austin's mother standing on the porch, looking up at the sky. The dim moonlight shone on her face, creating a peaceful but lonely scene. Unable to hold back, I walked out. "Can't sleep?" I asked softly. She turned around in surprise and smiled lightly. "Yeah, I'm usually like this." I walked over to stand next to her, looking up at the starry sky. Neither of us said anything more, just standing there silently. After a while, she turned back to look at me. "Hi, you are Austin's best friend, but I also consider you as my own child. Thank you for always caring for and helping Austin." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded slightly. She gently placed her hand on my shoulder, a gesture full of affection and warmth. A strange feeling suddenly ran through me. Since when, I had started to look at Austin's mother with different eyes. After that, she went back into the house and I returned to my room. Lying on the bed, my heart was in turmoil with new and complicated emotions. Thoughts about Austin's mother kept lingering in my mind, making me unable to rest in peace. The next morning, Austin's mother went to work early while Austin and I were still sleeping. When we woke up, we went out to have breakfast together. After that, I drove home. My house is on the outskirts of town. My family is a farmer. As the eldest child, I am very experienced in farming. My health is much better than Austin's, probably because I often work in the fields. My dark skin makes me look a little older than my real age. 2 days later, Austin called me and said, "This weekend, my mother and I are going to the beach. You should arrange your work and come with us." Seeing that, I also asked my parents for permission to go out with Austin this weekend. My parents happily agreed. On Friday afternoon, I brought some beach clothes and drove to Austin's house. As soon as he saw me, Austin happily ran out to greet me. "I thought you were busy and couldn't go with me." I parked my bike and said with a smile, "Why not go on a free trip?" We both laughed loudly and walked into the house together. At that time, Austin's mother had not returned yet. Austin and I prepared dinner together. Austin said that my mother had arranged for Saturday to be off, so she had 2 days free before going out. I didn't know why I felt happy. We were both excited to cook, clean, and arrange things. When Austin's mother returned, she was surprised and smiled when she saw that the dinner tray was almost ready. "Thank you both so much. Tired all day. Coming home to a meal like this is really heartwarming," she said as she washed her hands and prepared to sit at the table. During dinner, we discussed our plans for the beach trip in detail. Austin and I excitedly told her about the places we wanted to go and the games we wanted to try. Austin's mother listened, occasionally nodding and smiling. Her eyes sparkled with satisfaction and happiness, making the atmosphere in the house warmer than ever. The next morning, we woke up early. Austin's mother rented a self-driving car, and together we packed our luggage in the trunk. Since we were only going for 2 days, we didn't have much stuff. Great. You have created a very touching and humane story. To make the story more complete and engaging, I would like to correct some spelling and grammar errors and a few small details as follows. She drove along the road, and about 3 hours later, the sound of the waves began to echo, signaling that we had arrived. She drove into a motel. Since we had booked in advance, we just had to go to the reception desk to check in and bring our luggage. The room was quite spacious, with 2 beds separated by a pure white plasterboard. One side was for Austin and me, and the other was Austin's mother's room. The room was very nice and comfortable, giving a pleasant feeling from the moment we entered. As soon as we entered the room, Austin quickly changed his clothes without waiting for me. He ran like the wind to the beach, which was only about a 3-minute walk from the motel. Looking at Austin's innocent appearance, I just smiled and shook my head. I was about to change too. As soon as I took off my shirt to reveal my toned muscles, Austin's mother opened the door and walked in. She suddenly stopped, her face red, her eyes slightly shy. She quickly turned her back and walked out without saying anything. I quickly put my shirt back on, then opened the door and called her in. "Come in." Austin's mother slowly walked in, but her face was still red. I smiled gently and asked, "Do you need any help?" She shook her head and said no, then told me to quickly go to the beach with Austin. I smiled and nodded in agreement and quickly walked out the door. Only she was left in the room. Her heart was pounding. The image of my strong body kept lingering in her mind. An indescribable feeling crept into her heart, and she didn't realize that a small fire was smoldering in her soul. That evening, the three of us each drank a bottle of beer. I drank occasionally, but Austin almost never tried it. After dinner, we went back to our room. Austin lay down and slept like a pig, while I listened to music to relax my mind. It was around 10 p.m. when I saw Austin's mother open the door and go out. I was a little curious about where she was at this hour. At first, I didn't pay attention and continued listening to music, but after about 10 minutes without seeing her return, I felt something was wrong. I got up and walked out to look for her. Not knowing where she went, I just followed the path to the beach. When I reached the beach, the pale moonlight shone down, and a figure was walking quietly nearby. I approached and realized it was her. She turned to look at me and smiled. "You haven't slept yet?" I replied, "I saw you go out and haven't come back for a long time, so I came to look for you." She smiled gently and said, "I just went for a walk to relax." The sea breeze was cool, the waves were rustling. She and I walked and talked. It was late at night. Everyone gradually left the beach, leaving only her and me. When we reached a rocky beach, she sat down to rest, probably because she had been walking for too long. I also sat down right next to her. Suddenly, a strange feeling arose in my heart. I looked at her, and she also looked back at me. Her eyes were both sad and confusing. Perhaps because of the alcohol from last night, she became weaker. Suddenly, she grabbed my hand and held it tightly. I worriedly asked, "Are you okay?" She shook her head without saying a word, then as if she couldn't hold back her emotions, she slowly leaned her head on my shoulder and sobbed. I was speechless, not understanding what was happening, just sat still and let her lean on my shoulder. After a while, she calmed down. She said in a choked voice, "On the day of our wedding, she and Austin's father came here for their honeymoon." At that moment, I immediately understood that she was thinking about her husband who had passed away when he was only 5 months old. Then his father had a traffic accident. Since then, she became a widow at a very young age. The sea breeze blew, carrying with it an indescribable sadness. I didn't say anything more, just sat next to her, silently sharing the feelings she was carrying in her heart. After years of pressure and loneliness, now that she's back in the same place, it's hard for her not to think about the past. She still leans her head on my shoulder and whispers, "Hi, you know, there were times when I felt so tired and lonely. At times like that, I just locked myself in my room and cried. But then I overcame everything. Now those things are in the past. I don't keep them in my heart anymore." Hearing those words, I held her hand tighter and comforted her. "Don't worry, I'm still here with you." She looked up at me, her eyes still filled with tears. In a sudden moment, she closed her eyes, her lips slowly approaching mine. At that moment, I was mesmerized. An electric current ran through my body, making me unable to move. The intense emotions lasted for a moment. Then she let go of me, stood up and said, "I'm sorry. Let's go to sleep. It's late." On the way back to the room, we walked silently side by side, neither of us saying a word. When we got back to the room, I lay down, my mind full of thoughts. Everything that had just happened was so unexpected, I felt like I was being led by the nose, not knowing how to react. These jumbled thoughts kept swirling around in my head, and then I gradually fell asleep. The next morning was the last day of the vacation. We went to have breakfast together, then walked along the beach in the early morning breeze. The seawater was still cold, so no one swam. Everyone just walked along the beach and took pictures. The three of us seemed very happy, but through her eyes, I realized that she seemed to be hiding an unnamed sadness in her heart. It seemed that only I realized it. Many times when she saw me looking at her, she slightly avoided my eyes, as if she wanted to hide her true feelings. Although her appearance appeared normal, in my heart, I knew that between her and I, after last night, there was an irreversible change. At noon, we had lunch together. Today, we ate fresh seafood to prepare for the end of a short vacation. After eating, we went back to our room to rest. After resting for 30 minutes, Austin told me again, "I'm going to go swimming to relieve my cravings." As soon as I finished speaking, before I could agree, Austin quickly changed clothes and ran out the door, disappearing in a flash. I smiled and was about to change clothes when I suddenly saw her walk to the door and lock it. Then she walked over to where I was sitting. Seeing her approaching, I stood up and looked at her. She came extremely close to me. She lowered her head as if she was thinking about something, then raised her head to look at me. She put her arms around me, hugging me tightly. I was half a head taller than her, so it was easy for her to lean her head on my shoulder. She whispered softly, "Hi, just give me this once." My hands were numb. She tiptoed and gave me a passionate kiss. Then she was extremely proactive. She wrapped around me like an octopus catching its prey. At that moment, my head was spinning. A fierce fire had erupted inside me. Our clothes were scattered all over the floor. After a while, I gradually regained the initiative. That's a man's instinct. I took out the moves I learned from watching movies to practice. At that moment, the room was filled with spring, intermittent breathing, enchanting sounds echoed. It was like a fire was burning in both of our hearts. She gave me everything she had, and I received everything. Those sounds were becoming a romantic, longing symphony. Finally, when the climax reached its peak, I closed my eyes and tensed up. She made grunting and rapid breathing sounds from her mouth, and I lay on the bed, panting. She closed her eyes, feeling the sublimation and happiness. Perhaps it had been a long time since she had known that sweet feeling. She was extremely satisfied. Then she and I hugged each other again, feeling endless emotions. That afternoon, she drove. The three of us went home together, ending a happy vacation. But in my heart, it was a romantic vacation, full of longing, an extremely memorable vacation. From that day on, she never mentioned it again and never gave me the chance to get close to her. The distance between us just stopped as before. She still considered me as her own child, and I also understood that between us, the things I had thought could not happen. I realized that it could not have a good outcome. That matter became the biggest secret of my life. Ladies and gentlemen, our story will stop here. Hopefully, it has brought you the most interesting and wonderful emotions. If you find this story interesting, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment about your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next interesting stories. And now, Jane would like to say goodbye and see you again in the next videos. Wish you a wonderful day.